It is Sunday, the 19th of March, 2017. I'm in front of the Unitarian Church of Montreal, just starting up my alternative spiritual practice of protesting against Unitarian Universalist injustices, abuses, and hypocrisy, which include, but are by no means limited to, falsely accusing me of the criminal act of blasphemous libel in clergy sex abuse cover-up and denial legal bullying that seeks to cover up and hide from the public such despicable crimes as pedophilia and rape committed by certain Unitarian Universalist ministers, to say nothing of certain Unitarian Universalist Sunday school teachers and certain Unitarian Universalist lay leaders. So we're going to just start walking back and forth with a couple of picket signs. And you got a couple of other, a few other freestanding ones. In my right hand, I have the old classic that says "Unsafe Sect," and in my left hand, I have a picket sign that says "Unitarian Universalist Perversion of Justice sucks you asterisk you." And we're just going to circulate here back and forth like we're supposed to do according to legal requirements for peaceful public protest. You're not supposed to stand in one place, although I actually have seen a fair number of protests where people do in fact just stay in one spot and even set up a desk with pamphlets and so on. So anyhow, I'm quite used to getting my Sunday constitutional, which is obviously a little play on words regarding the use of the word constitutional as meaning a vigorous walk for exercise purposes, and of course exercising my constitutionally guaranteed right to engage in peaceful public protest. So as I said, I've been falsely accused of the criminal act of blasphemous libel, which is still in the Canadian Criminal Code in 2017, on the 150th anniversary of Canada's Confederation. Canada still has a blasphemy law in the Criminal Code, and immoral, unethical, borderline criminal, and quite frankly batshit crazy atheist Unitarians down in Boston thought it'd be a really good idea to hire Stikeman Elliott Barristers and Solicitors litigation lawyer Maitre Marc-Andre Coulombe to falsely accuse me of violating Canada's blasphemy law by allegedly, and I do say allegedly, making unfounded and vicious allegations to the effect that ministers of the association engage in such despicable crimes as pedophilia and rape. When I received the cease and desist demand letter that included that phrase, I wrote to Maitre Marc-Andre Coulombe and explained to him that I was having considerable difficulty finding blog posts, because he was talking about blog posts, that matched his description of unfounded and vicious allegations to the effect that ministers of the association engage in such despicable crimes as pedophilia and rape. And I asked him to properly identify exactly which the Emerson Avenger blog post he was talking about, because he had not identified any specific blog posts in his initial cease and desist demand letter. He just used very broad general terms such as those I just said. So I was expecting him to identify blog posts in which I'd blogged about Unitarian Universalist pedophiles and rapists, and he did no such thing. He responded to my letter asking him for more detailed information about which blog posts he was talking about by saying, and this is not exactly 100% word for word quote, but very close to what he said, your claims not to be able to find the offending material are not credible, blah, 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 blah. In other words, my letter asking, telling him that A, I couldn't find any blog post that matched his description, was basically not true, was not credible, essentially accusing me of lying. So I had to write back to him and explain to him, well, no, I know where I blogged about Unitarian Universalist pedophiles and rapists. I just don't know where the unfounded blog posts are. The blog posts that I posted were about Unitarian Universalists who were charged, tried, and convicted of such despicable crimes as pedophilia and rape, and were sentenced to jail terms, and this was reported in newspapers. So I don't see how you can try to pretend that I'm making unfounded and vicious allegations about Unitarian Universalist ministers engaging in such despicable crimes as pedophilia and rape, when the only cases I've actually blogged about were cases where the Unitarian Universalists in question were actually convicted of pedophilia and or rape. And I never got a response to that letter. In fact, I never heard from Maître Marc-André Coulombe again, in spite of sending him quite a number of follow-up communications asking him to provide, more details and provide some evidence to back up his claims. I should add that the blasphemous libel accusation was by no means the only false accusation that he brought against me in his initial cease and desist demand letter. He also accused me of alleged sexual harassment of female Unitarian Universalist ministers, and both of those claims were highly questionable, to say the least, and at least in one case I'd say absolutely outright false. And on the contrary, the minister was guilty of sexual harassment herself, and I was criticizing it. So in any case, getting back to the whole misuse of blasphemy law issue, the fact of the matter is that one of the things that makes the UUA's misuse of blasphemy law so crazy is that the Unitarian and Universalist religious communities independently, prior to merging in 1961, both had a strong tradition of opposing blasphemy laws, and this is because both Unitarians and Universalists had been persecuted and indeed prosecuted under various blasphemy laws because their religious beliefs were heretical in terms of traditional Trinitarian Christianity. The Unitarians were considered heretics because they denied the doctrine of the Trinity, and the Universalists were considered heretics because they proclaimed universal salvation. Nobody goes to hell, everyone's saved, and so on. So both of these theological positions were considered heresies by the, mainstream Trinitarian Christian church, and Unitarian Universalists were prosecuted with the blasphemy laws over centuries, essentially. So it's just outrageously hypocritical for the Unitarian Universalist Association in the 21st century to falsely accuse me of the criminal act of blasphemous libel in legal bullying that's clearly intended to intimidate me into removing blog posts that actually tell the truth about such despicable crimes as pedophilia and rape committed by certain Unitarian Universalist ministers. So, got a Station 11 police car here, and it looks like it's just going to drive by from the look of things, which is what it should do, in my opinion. There's really no reason for that police car to stop and for the officer to get out and to basically interfere with my protest. And I do believe that Station 11 cops have finally learned that the best thing to do is just let me exercise my constitutionally guaranteed civil rights and freedoms instead of trying to prevent me from exercising them in various ways with threats of fines, tickets, threats of arrest on criminal charges and so on, which unfortunately has happened a few times, or more than a few times actually, in the past. But since I've been videoing almost everything that happens now during my protest and posting the videos to YouTube, and some of those videos containing less than flattering interactions with the SPVM cops, because they're basically behaving in a manner that can be properly seen as abuse of authority and incompetence and even stupidity. Those videos, 3 of which went up in 2012, I believe were instrumental in significantly reducing SPVM police interventions in efforts to try and suppress my protest since 2012. In fact, the last time there was any kind of intervention from SPVM police officers was May 1st last year. It is now March 19th. So we're just over a month away from celebrating a full year of non-interference by the SPVM in my protest, which I think is something of a milestone. There were 1 or 2 periods in the past where the police, weren't coming so much. So it's possible that there were 1 or 2 periods of a year that went by, and the police never intervened with my protest. But certainly, 2007, 2008, there was a fair number of interventions. 2010, 11, 12, again, a fair number of interventions. But it began to decrease after those 3 2012 interventions in which the police looked really foolish, and the videos were up on YouTube. In 2014 and 2015, there was a small number of interventions, not that many. One was the result of a false assault accusation brought against me by a member of the Unitarian Church of Montreal, when in fact I had done absolutely no such thing, and on the contrary, I had actually been assaulted by a female member of the church, by Margot Ellis. She gave me a body check worthy of a NHL hockey player and sent me flying onto my back in the snow on the 4th of January of 2014. And I debated whether or not I should call in an assault complaint to the SPVM. I didn't do so right away because it wasn't an emergency situation in my view. But what happened is, about an hour later, as I was about to leave after completing my protest, the police showed up, and I was being accused of knocking a woman down in front of the church, which of course was the exact opposite of what happened. Thankfully, the police officers who responded to the call, after being initially, well, one of them anyway, was, he made the accusation and he seemed quite, firm about it, but I was able to persuade the officers, or actually 4 of them total, that, well, no, actually, I didn't knock anyone down outside the church, and in fact, the exact opposite had happened, and they actually took my complaint against Margot Ellis, since they happened to be there. That was one of the last interventions. It was rather disappointing, actually. The police, in that instance, basically behaved quite professionally, and they took my complaint of assault against Margot Ellis in a professional manner, but then the detective at Station 11 dismissed the complaint. She claimed, you know, that she couldn't prove intent, which I think is ridiculous, because first of all, it was pretty obvious that that Margot Ellis's body check was intentional. In the video, you can see that. But on top of that, my understanding is that in terms of the least serious form of assault, which is simple assault, voie de fait simple, I think in French, you don't need to prove intent. You just have to prove that the person, you know, was physically assaulted. You don't have to prove any actual criminal intent, if I'm not mistaken. So basically, as far as I'm concerned, the detective just lied because she wasn't interested in pursuing the case. So then, as I said, you know, since 2014 January, there were a couple of interventions regarding my chalk slogans, and the police actually handled those quite well. Basically, in fact, the videos that I put up spoke of a polite and professional SPVM intervention. I recognize that A, they were polite, and B, they were professional. And then, as I said, you know, the most recent, which isn't that recent at all, intervention was May 1st of last year, when a couple of, well, actually maybe more than a couple of police officers showed up. You know, basically tried to persuade me to end my protest. One of the things that they said was that the church members were getting together to, yeah, we're still recording, just want to make sure we're still recording. The church members were basically, once again, you know, planning to bring some kind of criminal charge against me or something, or perhaps planning to try and obtain a restraining order against me. You know, so they told me this. You know, they even used the term upgradé, you know, an Anglicism there, you know,